Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing the RCMP's use of on-device surveillance technology, where basically they zombify a phone, and they can use a phone that belongs to someone else they're investigating to open the camera, turn on the microphone, scroll through the entire contents of the phone without that person knowing about it. Now, Brenda, in this case, the RCMP has says that they had warrants. Is there any information about whether the warrant restricted what they could do with this on-device technology? As I gave those examples, like perhaps you could have a warrant that would limit them to simply opening some emails or observing incoming calls or wiretapping specific calls. These are all traditional investigative tools that might already be available, especially wiretaps. We're familiar with that. But what about turning on the microphone and the camera? I mean, what is the scope of these warrants when this technology is being deployed?
Another awesome question to which the answer is we don't know, because while a sample warrant was released to the committee, we don't actually have copies of any warrants that are for any particular investigation. And as we know in the legal community, the devil is always in the details when it comes to these things. So for any particular investigation, investigators are going to have potentially a range of targets and potentially a variety of ways in which they want to conduct their surveillance. So it's really hard to even judge whether or not the warrants are reasonable, what capacities of the tools are being used, or any other detail about their use in the absence of more information.
Yeah, and that lack of information is certainly concerning. Brenda, I want to know I want you to paint a picture for us of how the use of this technology could go wrong, but what the maybe over-the-line uses are, what some nefarious uses by our own police could be. Because I know the response of some people is always going to be, people who have nothing to hide don't need to worry about this technology. Why do you think that's not the case?
Well, I think that we almost don't even need to go so far as to speculate on potential nefarious uses by our own police, because the reality is that in any investigation, simple mistakes can happen with no nefarious intent. These tools are super invasive. Whether or not it ends up being someone who is completely innocent of the allegations or suspicions, who is subject to this sort of incredibly granular and detailed surveillance for ultimately no cause, whether or not it's third parties associated with an individual under investigation whose information is also being swept up as part of investigations, either by having their own device tapped or simply by being within range in a home of someone else's device when the camera's turned on or when the mic goes live. These are devices that if you think about the way you use your phone, chances are very good that you carry it from boardroom to bathroom to bedroom. So depending on when the devices happen to be turned on, when those mics or cameras are live, there's a wide range of invasions that could happen, not just to an accused or a suspect, but to anyone around them.
Yeah, it's certainly a really uncomfortable notion of, really it's this sense of Big Brother is watching, right? Now, the All-Party National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians has announced they're going to conduct what they call a framework review of the use of this technology. This is a separate committee from the Ethics Committee that already looked into this. So what should we expect from this committee, especially since they've already described the use of this surveillance as lawful?
Well, I think that the framing of an investigation is fundamentally important to what we can expect from it. And you're quite right in pointing out that framing gives rise to concern that there's really going to be a thorough deep dive into the implications of this technology. Because, again, it's not just what can happen here, but what Canada is contributing to by participating in this sort of global spyware marketplace. We know that these tools are created by companies who are selling them to authoritarian governments. We know that these tools are being used to attack human rights defenders. In Canada, we know that there was a Canadian individual whose phones were infected by spyware, and information from those phones very likely contributed to the ultimate seizure and killing of Jamal Khashoggi.
Wow.
So there's Canadian connections to the ways that these technologies are used by others. That means we shouldn't be contributing to this market.
We've got to go to break.